So yesterday we were talking about using some braking eccentrics, braking swings to help modulate stiffness in the hips and the glutes and the hamstrings of some of our cycling athletes, aerobic athletes, athletes who get stiff. Well, we can use the same iteration, same idea to help manage some of the lumbar instability or motor control problems we see with athletes who tend to be a little bit more extension sensitive or extension driven. So we see plenty of athletes who have very successful track records in sport, but who have history of spondy or extension sensitivity or anterior pelvic tilt. And what ends up happening is that it gets fast in high volume or fast in huge loads, aka our Olympic lifters, and we start to see this problem emerge, then it, as we've talked about in the past on this channel, creates potentially a lot of downstream loss of capacity and sometimes discomfort, right? So one of the ways that we do this and help manage this with our athletes who are hypermobile, who have no ligamentous control for whatever reason, or lack the motor control or development feeling of controlling, movement control, is that we can always slow them down. So instead of kettlebell swings, they may end up getting something that looks like a box squat, where we can really slow down this controlled hinge, where I still looks a lot like a kind of swing or a deadlift push eccentric, but I'm really able to control that two-hand rule and help the athlete feel and develop the movement control so that they can have that spatial awareness. But we know ultimately, we're going to have to test this with some speed. And one of the things that will irritate an extension-sensitive athlete is a lot of swings, especially when they're done from this overhead position. Now, I suspect Pavel likes the snatch in the kettlebell stuff. Oftentimes, we see him recommend coming down into a front rack position and then into your next swing. And one of the reasons I love that motion is that I'm getting another position. I get to eccentrically load and control into this front rack, and then I flip it down. But one of the things we get when we go from a snatch to this lower with a single arm is that I also get to diminish potentially some of the huge motor impulse or the moment arm of this swinging device. So being able to come down shortens this so I potentially don't have huge weights crashing into the athlete. Now, the reason that matters is, of course, you should be able to swing any way you want, but if I have athletes who, again, are extension sensitive or don't have good movement control through the pelvis, one of the things that we tend to see is as the athlete will finish, they will tend to come down, and in this moment of transition, because of the loading, because of the patterning, because of the tissue, whatever it is, we see them end up a little bit in an extension bias. So all of a sudden, the kettlebell comes down to the bottom position, and now I'm loading this athlete under immense impulse, immense load, right? We know that a heavy kettlebell swing done for speed can put a lot of force into the system. So that spine is very different in handling extension load here versus handling extension load here. And the difference is that I may not have an athlete who has developed the control to manage that hinge and ends up giving that away at the bottom. So one of the ways that we finish this or help them modulate this is to be, of course, you can shorten them up, like we said, right? You can just have them swing to here. But going from that snatch down, if they keep the butt on as long as possible, that's what we say, find your butt as soon as you can. So I'm pushing, find my butt as soon as I can. That glute early in range will help the athlete to manage this overhead position with a cue around organizing the pelvis. And again, that's just how fast can you squeeze your butt? Boom. Now my butt is on, I'm better controlled overhead. Second, can you keep the butt on longer during the eccentric? So that simple cue of either keeping the butt on will help to keep that organized pelvis between lumbar and pelvis relationship in a more beneficial position. We have better access, better length tension relationships, more mid-range than when we do here. Now clearly, we're going to end up here sometimes. That should not be a problem. But it definitely, if we get to the bottom of that chewy caramel center, that can be enough to light up or sensitize the extension sensitivity in our athletes. And more importantly, it's a less effective way at generating force, right? I'm putting a hinge in the middle of a system that doesn't necessarily develop the best force in that position. So snatching that kettlebell, right? How fast can I get my butt on? It looks like a muscle variation in this thing. Or even if I was power snatching, it's how fast can I get the butt on? And then can I leave the butt on? I've found a good position. I got my feet, glutes are engaged like we talked about. And then as this comes down, can I keep the butt on longer? And the difference of just feeling like you have your glutes engaged, that microsecond means that you're less likely to drift into anterior pelvic tilt syndrome. So as we're trying to untangle anterior pelvic tilt, spondy, extension sensitivity in our athletes, we want to give them cues that helps them to manage their movement under speed. And it turns out, squeeze your butt, useful strategy.